Guys, this is gonna be a fun one. I'm gonna redesign the Volkswagen Corrado into a 2023 model. This is one of my favorite cars growing up, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this redesign is going to turn out. I'm gonna take you along on that journey. The Volkswagen Corrado is a compact 4-passenger or 2+2 3-door front-engine, front-wheel drive liftback coupe, marketed by Volkswagen from 1988 until 1995. The Corrado was designed by Herbert Schäfer, who was a major influence in the design phase of the fundamental renewal of Volkswagen's brand in the 1970s and the 1980s. Most of the cars Herbert designs were considered to be a bit safe and maybe even a little bit boring. A few examples of these cars that he designs were the revised Golf, the Passat, and the Polo. But the Corrado was different. It was an exciting car that still, in my opinion, look fantastic today. It's just a proper representation of a Volkswagen sports coupe. And speaking of proper representation, I'd like to take a minute to introduce today's sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. In 2020, there were over 5 million car accidents on the roads. That's 15,000 a day or 600 an hour. And those in an accident can be entitled to more than you think. And did you know that you don't really need a lot of money to hire a lawyer? When you're injured, you deserve compensation, and the size of your law firm matters. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm with over 800 lawyers and over 100 offices nationwide. And the best part, Morgan & Morgan's fee is completely free unless they win your case. Over 3 million people trust Morgan & Morgan, and getting started is easy. You can check out the link in the comment section for more information. Thanks to Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back to the redesign. Now, I said I'm gonna redesign or modernize the Volkswagen Corrado, but you know what? I think Volkswagen Group has already done that in a model back in 2010. And that car is the Audi Quattro. I think the Audi Quattro concept, unfortunately, this beauty and tight looking proportions of a machine did not make it into production. It is so sad that they didn't put this into production. But looking at the lines, I think this is a clear, it's a clear modernization of the Corrado. Just have to remove the Volkswagen, the Audi badges on the concept and replace them with Volkswagen, and you have a modernized Corrado. What I love about the Corrado is the shoulder line. It has a very unique shoulder line. Yes, in the front end it looks pretty traditional with a curvature over the front end axle, but as we go further back, it swings upwards like this. And this, I don't think I've seen this treatment of the rear shoulder like this in any other car, because usually what happens is, like we have in the Audi concept, it goes back up, so it dips upwards and then straight and then upwards again over the axles. But in this case, it just swings upwards and never really stabilizes or go back down to create this muscle over the rear end. And I think that's a unique feature that they added into the Corrado that, as I said, I haven't seen anywhere else. But looking at the greenhouse here, for example, the greenhouse is a proper modernization. We have this line going straight into the automatic wing that raises and lowers by itself, like we have in the Audi Quattro concept down here as well. You can see that the roofline is very similar to the Corrado, exactly the same kind of philosophy behind this, to have this line crashing into the rear, never really coming back up, as you can see right here. The graphics too, I think the graphics, just a square taillight, and we have a square taillight in the Audi Quattro concept as well. Same goes for the front end graphics. They sit pretty much in a panel, in a plane or a surface, a flat surface in the front of the car, and I think we have a similar modern treatment of that approach in the Audi Quattro concept. Unfortunately, Audi, I don't know why they didn't put this into production. It would be such a cool car to see out on the roads, and I was fortunate enough to see this in real life at the Villa d'Este in 2011, I believe it was, in Italy, right next to Lake Como. Very beautiful spot. So I want to show you a couple of concepts from the Corrado development. So I'm really glad that they did not go in this direction. If he wants to continue to design sort of boring looking cars, he would have accomplished that with this design because it has nothing unique about it except for making it into a two-door Golf. It still looks pretty cool, but I'm not sure about this two-tone, which dates it pretty significantly, and the front-end graphics looks almost exactly like a Golf. It doesn't have this more squinty look that we got in the production Corrado. So this is an interesting approach and idea for the Corrado. You can see that here we're moving forward. Now we have this upswing in the shoulder line. We do have some different taillights in this concept, but we're starting to have this raked front end with the headlights that then went into the production version of the Corrado. And they also made a magnum shooting brake concept of the Corrado, and this was the VR6. What's interesting about this, when you look at the rear end, you can see that these are clearly Audi AD headlights. And I want you to keep that in mind when I'm doing the redesign, because what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take the RS6 Avant taillights and reshape them and remold them to fit a modern version of the Corrado. So I'm gonna do something similar to what they did here. Took some Audi headlights, but here they just slapped them on and they look a little bit weird proportionally. I think maybe the taillights look a little too like big or oversized for the overall package, but I think that just makes it you know, even more unique and more cool. I would love to see this car out on the streets because of just the proportions of this thing. It's a funny looking car. Still looks pretty cool with these wheels on them. Alright, so let's jump into the redesign. I want to give you some backstory to the Volkswagen Corrado and how it came to be, the specs and tech, the different engine options and so on as we redesign this car. It was launched in 1988 and every single Corrado was a front-wheel drive only car. It launched with two engine options. You had a 1.8 liter inline 4 with 136 horsepower and a supercharged 1.8 liter inline 4 with 160 horsepower, and this was called the G60. Volkswagen introduced two new engines for 1992. The first one was a naturally aspirated 2-liter inline 4, still with the same 136 horsepower as the original 1.8 liter, and it was basically just a development of the original 1.8 liter inline 4. This 2-liter engine was not available in the North American markets, and then there was the iconic, the classic, legendary Corrado VR6. I really wanted this car when I was growing up. I thought it had such a cool design and the engine was awesome as well. It had a full 190 horsepower. 0 to 60 was done in just 6.9 seconds, and it got a different name here in the US. Here, it was called the Corrado SLC, which stood for Sport Luxury Coupe. I think that's a way less of a cool name than the Corrado VR6. But this genius design of the VR6 engine allowed engineers to fit a 6-cylinder engine into a space originally intended for 4 cylinders only. And this allowed not only for more power, but you also got the smoothness of a straight 6 engine. 1994 was unfortunately the last model year for the Corrado here in the United States. One really cool features of the Corrado, in addition to the flush mounted windows, which was kind of a new thing in car design, is the active rear spoiler. And this raises automatically when the car exceeds a certain speed, and these speeds for some reason were different depending on which market the car was sold in. For example, for most of the world, the wing goes up at 100 kilometers per hour, which is pretty, basic number, easy to remember, 62 miles per hour. But specific for the US market, they lowered that speed to 72 kilometers per hour, or 45 miles per hour, so you can flex when you go slower in the US, or you can automatically control this wing from a button on the inside. The Corrado was superseded by the Volkswagen Scirocco, which looks great, but in my opinion it lacked that uniqueness that you found in the Corrado's design. A total of over 97,000 Corrados were manufactured over the 7-year production run. And it's been described in many ways from different automotive journalists. For example, Auto Express magazine described it as regarded as one of Volkswagen's best ever driver's cars. and the VR6 model was listed as one of the 25 cars you must drive before you die by the British magazine Car, and it was labeled the most desirable version of the Corrado by Auto Express. And so now let's have a look at this redesign and see what's actually going on here. As I usually tend, what I want to do with my redesigns is I want it to look like the original, but in a modern shape. I don't want to create a brand new design language for the cars I redesign. I want to have the essence, the soul of the original still intact, but having all the modern features applied to it, not just when it comes to graphics, but also when it comes to the proportions and the line flow and so on. So I decided, I wasn't sure if I wanted to change the shoulder line and remove this upswing, but in the end I decided to make it more modern and have a more traditional looking rear fender, add some more muscle to the rear end. And as I said, I wanted to take the RS6 Avant taillights, and I'm gonna make some final changes at the very end of this redesign to these taillights, because I was fiddling around with those designs for a while before I decided on what I actually wanted to do with it. But I think the end result turned out really cool, and I also took the rear end diffuser and exhaust from the RS6 Avant. And of course, we need to create a brand new rear bumper. We can't have the bumper from the 80s and 90s and have it be a modern car, so we need to redesign the entire rear end and hopefully have some connection between the graphic parts. Instead of the automated wing, instead I want to have an integrated ducktail into the trunk of this car. I think that would look really cool, specifically since we have this very chopped off rear end. I want to have a nice send-off of that, the rear end when you look at this car from a side view. And the greenhouse of the 80s and 90s, they were a lot bigger. There was more glass mass in the older cars. So I need to shrink down the greenhouse a little bit and also add some more mass in the lower part of the car, specifically the side and also the front, and work a little bit more on the front to reduce the overhang in the front end, because the Corrado has a pretty substantial overhang in the front end when you look at the original from a side view. So I want to reduce that by just a couple of inches, and of course, last but not least, we need to add some proper wheels onto this and really plant this car on the ground. I think this turned out really cool. Let me know what you think about this design in the comments below, and you can download the full PSD file with all the layers intact. I got 43 layers in this specific file. You can check that out on my Patreon at patreon.com/TheSketchMonkey. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.